Hello viewers, today I would like to start to read The Spiritual Guide by Miguel de Molinos. Now, I do believe there have been some people on my channel who have been interested in this topic and have awaited more in regard to Miguel and the book that he has written, and everything that has to do with Quietism. I did at least one video about it. I have talked about it before. My username is the Windward Quietist, and many of you, or at least a few of you, have shown some interest in my video about Miguel, as well as Quietism and how this was a particular movement within Western Europe, especially Italy, Spain, and France. Miguel de Molinos is peradventure the most I suppose the most well-known, and if not the most well-known quietist, the most influential. Now you may be asking, well, what is Quietism? What is a quietist? A quietist is simply a person who believes, I suppose, to speak very simply, that quiet prayer is the most effectual. Very simply, this did not conform to the views of the Catholic Church. There were many people who were living in Italy who decided to read the book that Miguel de Molinos had written and apply what was in it. This led certain people to abandon their idols. For example, things such as images of Jesus and the Virgin Mary and other individuals. It led them not to reverence them, not to bow to them, not to pray before them, as is common in the Catholic Church. Their emphasis upon quiet prayer also led to the abandonment by them of rosaries, as well as the very Jesuit-based forms of meditation, in favor of contemplation as uncontrived prayer. Contemplation can mean basically thinking about God, or having a connection with God even. Contemplation as a word can mean a good many things, but essentially these people were, how should it be said, becoming less traditional. And this was, of course, a threat to the Roman Church. The book in question is quite interesting. Today, I would say I do have a somewhat limited time to read it. I do have to go and help get some wood for this house. We burn wood here. And we have to get it from some Amish people. It's a bit weird. They have, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I really do not like dealing with them, to be honest, but never mind. You do not need to worry about my complaints. Anyhow, this book is basically about prayer. We are going to basically establish, how should I say, we're going to try to understand some of the reasoning behind it. I myself advocate for the view of Molinos. Now, we are going to read one passage from this book just so that we can, how should I say, what would be the word? Just so that we can gain an understanding of his own worldview and how this connects to what the Bible actually says, especially the Gospels. One moment, viewers. I have to take a small break. Okay, I will be back in about one moment or so. All right. If I have to take a few pauses to clear my throat, please excuse me. In order to not wake another person up in this house, I have to do this video in somewhat of a colder room that I have not warmed up. It's a bit of a bigger room, so if I were to warm it up, it would take a long time. Anyhow, okay, let me see, where was I? Here we go. So, from this book, page 37, God hath no regard to the multitude of words, but to the purity of intent. His greatest content and glory at that time is to see the soul in silence, desirous, humble, quiet, and resigned. Very interesting. Now, let us see how this connects with Matthew 6:7 and Matthew 6:8 from the King James translation. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. Now, this is quite interesting, because from these two verses we can essentially know that the act of prayer is essentially mental at its root. And that the true essence of it is mental. Another word for mental can be spiritual. It has to do with the mind. To such an extent that speaking a good deal is really of no consequence. What matters is what is in the mind. In other words, the intent, how should it be said, the purpose. Even if not many words are said, or if no words at all are said, the purity of the prayer is intact. This is what this book is about. This is what so-called Quietism is about. You may ask, why is there a word called Quietism? The reason the word Quietism and Quietist exists as terms is because as people who were Catholics, who were Christians, decided to essentially leave a good deal of the ceremony in favor of something more authentic, which in this case would be quiet prayer. Excuse me, I had to drink some water. In this case would be quiet prayer. The Catholic Church became extremely antagonistic towards these people. And even to this day, so-called Quietism is a heresy. In other words, this is the idea that you can just contemplate with God, spend time with God in quiet prayer. We can call it contemplation, we can use many words for it, but essentially this is spending the time with the Lord in silence without any need of ceremony. Now, to many Protestant Christians, this may seem completely normal, or at least to some of them. There are many Protestants as well who are also very intent on ceremony as well, and doing things in very set, uniform ways. But Quietism was not this. Quietism was something unorthodox in the sense that they were not praying for rosaries, they were not saying set prayers, they were simply spending time with the Lord, and if they had words, they spoke or thought words, and if they did not have words, they simply sat in silence with the Lord. But they did not end their prayer. They continued their prayer. Even if they did not have words, they continued their prayer. This is essentially the methodology, so to speak. You could call it a method, but it is not so much a method as it is an intent or decision to do something in a very unceremonial, unorthodox way. In other words, there are no rules. In other words, you are not saying a set prayer, you are not speaking a good deal for the sake of speaking or trying to make something eloquent with more words. You are simply praying in silence. I suppose I've given you a grasp of the contention between the Catholic Church and people who followed what was written in the book by Molinos, as well as in the Bible, in which it saith, much speaking does not really amount to much. So yes, I am going to begin. I do not have that much time to talk at this moment. This is the book that you can get yourself. I will have a link in the comments or in the description. As well as put some passages from it in the description to essentially fill my description box so that, that helps the video if you do that. So the full, you may ask, well, how do we have this book if it was considered heretical by the Catholic Church? You would think they would have burned them all. And if you were that perceptive as to assume this, you are entirely correct. You happen to be entirely correct. The Catholic Church did burn translations of this book, or rather, the very first translations of this, not necessarily translations, but the very first versions of this book. As far as I knew, they were in Latin. Peradventure, someone translated them into French and Italian. I'm not necessarily sure if this book was written in Latin to begin with, but essentially the versions in Italy, the versions in Spain, the versions in France are non-existent as far as I know. Fortunately, this book was translated into English, and English was far less strict, and the Catholic Church could not really exert power in England at that time to ban this book or destroy this book or destroy copies of this book. So the English copies exist and we can read them. Now it exists in very old English, in sooth. The English is very beautiful, very fragrant in this particular book. It is a shame that the other translations did not exist, because that would really extend the range of it. Especially considering the ongoing hypocrisy of the Catholic Church throughout the world. It would be wonderful if there were other translations of this book in French, in Spanish. I'm sure that someone has translated this book into different languages, but no, the Catholic Church made sure that other versions were completely destroyed. There's another book called The Simple Mirror of the Soul, or The Mirror of Simple Souls. I had to take another sip of water. There's another one that is essentially a book pertaining to Quietism. That particular book was also destroyed. Copies of it were burned. Marguerite Porete was a Bedouin. I believe a Bedouin was a woman who used to go around. They used to call them mystics or something of that sort. In other words, there were Christians who Bedouins were women. Usually they lived a very austere life, but essentially these women were not nuns, and they were not really connected to an institution. And this was the problem. The Catholic Church had problems with these people. The Catholic Church had problems with people they called Quietists as well. I think Quietists as a concept would come after Marguerite Porete, but essentially Marguerite Porete comes under the category of what you would call mysterious or mystical type of Christian. In other words, personal experience was heavily involved in her practice of religion, Christianity, what have you. And so, because the ideas of Marguerite Porete were considered unorthodox, the Catholic Church decided to try her and make her denounce the book that she had written. And they said, if you do not do it, we'll burn you. And they did, to put it simply. Luckily, that book was translated into English. I do not know if there are French translations of it. She was a French woman. That book, you can read it. And peradventure, I will talk about it on this channel at some point. But nonetheless, essentially a lot of what she had in her book was very similar to what Miguel de Molinos has in his book. I think, let me see. The full title of this book is The Spiritual Guide Which Disentangles the Soul and Brings It by the Inward Way to the Getting of Perfect Contemplation. So anyhow, let us begin this. This book will have some Latin in it. I will try my best to. My pronunciation of it is going to be different than other people's. Anyhow, the way of, let me see, should I expand this? Perhaps I should not. Okay. Here we go. Yes, if I could get rid of this area of the screen, that would also be good, but you can see it quite well, I suppose. Let me see. Yeah, I cannot switch tabs. I'm going to take one little pause, one little moment, viewers, to clear my throat. All right. Okay. I think I will not go full screen just in case I need to switch to this. I need to walk away from this computer. So, let us begin with the preface. I'm just going to go right into it. The way of inward peace is in all things to be conformed to the pleasure and disposition of the divine will. In omnibus debemus subjacere voluntatem nostrum voluntati divinoi. Hoi est enim pax voluntatis nostroi ut sit per omnia conformis voluntate divinoi. By Hugo Cardinalis in Psalm 13. I have no idea what that means, but I just read it anyhow. Such as would have all things succeed and come to pass, according to their own fancy, are not come to know this way. Viam passus non cognoverunt. Psalm 13. And therefore lead a harsh and bitter life, always restless and out of humor, without treading in the way of peace, which consists in a total conformity to the will of God. This conformity is the sweet yoke that introduces us into the regions of internal peace and serenity. Hence, we may know that the rebellion of our will is the chief occasion of our disquiet, and that we will not submit to, and because we will not submit to the sweet yoke of the divine will, we must suffer so many straits and perturbations. I suppose I should talk a little about some of the content that we have just read. We will be encountering the concept of submitting, or rather being passive and subject before God, before the divine will, many times. We will be encountering that concept a good deal. Let me continue. O soul, if we submitted our own to the divine will and to all his disposition, what tranquility should we feel? What sweet peace? What inward serenity? What supreme felicity? Felicity means happiness and earnest bliss. This then is to be the burden of this book. May it please God to give me his divine light for discovering the secret parts of this inward way and the chief felicity of perfect peace, that is to say, chief happiness. You will read a good deal of Quaker or Quietist books. Not to say that there are many Quietist books. I would say the book of, I would say the book that has been written by Molinos is probably the only true Quietistic type book, in my opinion, because many people really did not outright say the things that he said in this book. But I would say this. In many Quaker books especially, which Quakers have been inspired a great deal by Miguel de Molinos, they talk a good deal about inward light in silence. In other words, the Lord is with you, the Lord is always with you, and so you can just pray and he's with you, he's always with you, and you can sort of have peace, very easily, because he's with you and you have faith in that. To put it simply, but we will see, much talk about light, and that's what it has to do with. Very simple concept. There are some verses relevant to that, but I do not really have them on hand. All right. That's the first part. And I did skip the introduction. The introduction is more about the English part of the translation. And I think I unintentionally skipped it as well. But it really is not that important. Peradventure, it is better that I do not waste time by talking about it. Well, let me begin. To the end God may rest in the soul, the heart is always to be kept peaceable in whatsoever disquiet, temptations, and tribulation. Thou art to know that thy soul is the center, habitation, and kingdom of God. That therefore, and of course, some of you may know about the verse. I think I can sort of just look for things, honestly. Because I believe we can find this in our King James Bible. It may be confusing to some people because some people peradventure have never... Oh Lord, I have my internet off, so I can't really search for the verse. It's alright. Anyhow, there's a verse in the Bible that says the kingdom is within. That is in the New Testament somewhere. You can look for it. It's easy to search up if you have the internet. But I have mine cut off right now because I just thought I would start, reading and not really paying attention to that. That therefore, to the end, the sovereign king may rest on that throne of thy soul, thou oughtest to take pains to keep it clean, quiet, void, and peaceable, clean from guilt and defects, quiet from fears, void of affections, desires, and thoughts, and peaceable in temptations and tribulations. Thou oughtest always, then, to keep thine heart in peace, that thou mayest keep pure that temple of God, and with a right and pure intention, thou art to work, pray, obey, and suffer, without being the least moved. Whatever it pleases the Lord to send unto thee, because it is certain that for the good of the soul and for thy spiritual profit, he will suffer the envious enemy to trouble that city of rest and throne of peace, with temptations, suggestions, and tribulations, and by means of creatures with painful troubles and grievous persecutions. I am going to take one small little break. Okay. I do need to blow my nose and clear my throat. Goodness, it's kind of cold in here. Alright. I will drink a little water and then I will be continuing. Hopefully the microphone did not have any distortion because I had to move it a little bit. Alright. I do have some very intelligent and interesting subscribers. I'm just saying that just based on what I read in the comment sections and on profiles that I see. I do have some very intelligent and interesting subscribers, which I quite appreciate. Anyhow, I just felt like saying that. Anyhow, let me continue. Where was I? Alright. With temptations, suggestions, and tribulations, and by the means of creatures with painful troubles and grievous persecutions. Be constant and cheer up thine heart, in whatsoever disquiet these tribulations may cause to thee. Enter within it, that thou mayest overcome it. For therein is the divine fortress which defends, protects, and fights for thee. If a man hath a safe fortress, he is not disquieted, though his enemies pursue him, because by retreating within it, these are disappointed and overcome. The strong castle that will make thee triumph over all thine enemies. And yes, this particular book is very old, and therefore, if you get it, know that you may have to read into it a bit. In other words, if this says he, but it's thee, obviously. So you can sort of correct that when you're reading. Triumph over all thine enemies, visible and invisible, and over their snares and tribulations. It's within thine own soul, because in it resides divine aid and sovereign succor. Retreat within it, and all will be quiet, secure, peaceable, and calm. It ought to be thy sheath and continual exercise. O Lord, I may have to drink some water at some point. Exercise to pacify that throne of thy heart, that the Supreme King may rest within. The way to pacify it will be to enter into thyself by means of internal recollection. We will encounter this word a good deal. You may think, well, recollection, are you remembering something? In this case, it means to relax, it means to be at peace, it means to be tranquil. Recollection can mean that. I do have a dictionary, so I should probably look that up. And show ye. Because I just think that not too many people are familiar with this particular definition in terms of recollection. So we will look at the Merriam-Webster's collegiate. Alright, tranquility of mind, religious contemplation. Essentially peace. I will exit this. All thy protection is to be prayer, and a loving recollection in the divine presence. When thou seest thyself more sharply assaulted, retreat into that region of peace, where thou wilt find the fortress. When thou art more faint-hearted, betake thyself to this refuge of prayer, the only armor for overcoming the enemy and mitigating tribulation. Thou oughtest not to be at a distance from it in a storm, to the end thou mayest, as another Noah, experience tranquility, security, and serenity, and to the end thy will may be resigned, devoted, peaceful, and courageous. Finally, be not afflicted nor discouraged to see thyself faint-hearted. He returns to quiet thee, that still he may stir thee, because this divine Lord will be alone with thee, to rest in thy soul and form therein a rich throne of peace, that within thine own heart, by means of internal recollection, that is to say, internal peace, and with his his heavenly grace, thou mayest look for silence and tumult. Solitude, tumult means chaos, means something loud, noisy, a disturbance, so to speak. Solitude in company, light in darkness, forgetfulness in pressures, vigor in despondency, courage in fear, resistance in temptation, peace in war, and quiet in tribulation. Now, viewers, should we read chapter 2? Should we read into this book even more? Peradventure this chapter will not be too long. As I said, I do have to go somewhere at least 10 o'clock today. I will spend some more time with you. Chapter 2. Okay. Though the soul perceive itself deprived of discourse. Discourse is essentially talk. I suppose you would call that vocal exchange to a certain degree. We will have to review these words as we go, but we can easily do that. Discourse. All right. In truth. Okay, we're not really looking at the etymology of it. We do not need to be that confusing. Spoken exchange. In other words, whether you're speaking, whether the Lord is speaking to you, or there's simply silence. This is an excellent definition here in the thesaurus. Spoken exchange, chat, so to speak. Are you speaking with the Lord, or are you just sitting there with the Lord in silence? Alright, now we're really getting to the business of prayer. One moment, I have to clear my throat yet again. I'm so very sorry for this. Alright, I had to drink a little bit of water, and now I am ready. Ratiocination. Ratiocination means thinking. Ratiocination simply means thinking, means thoughts, reasoning, what have thee, so to speak. That is what ratiocination means. Alright? Well, look at this definition. Why do I have... Oh no, I'm not looking for the Urban Dictionary. I'm so sorry, viewers. Exact, valid, and rational reasoning. Alright. Logic, rationality, reason. In other words, thinking. Which is what reason means, if you look at the etymology of it. Ratiocination is basically thinking, reasoning. Yet it ought to persevere in prayer and not to be afflicted, because that is its greater felicity. Felicity means happiness. Yes, so we can move on from that. Thou wilt find thyself as all other souls that are called by the Lord to the inward way, full of confusion and doubts, because in prayer thou hast failed in discourse. In other words, you are speaking in your mind, you're talking outward, or you're talking to the Lord. Sometimes, peradventure, it is better not to talk. Sometimes, peradventure, it's better just to be silent before the Lord. It will seem to thee that God does no more assist thee as formerly, that the exercise of prayer is not in thy power, that thou losest time, whilst hardly and with great trouble thou canst make one single ejaculation, as thou wast wont to do. And as for people who are being nasty, no, this means, because we have a lot of people, especially in the United States, and I speak from experience and I'm not talking about everyone. There are many people, English speakers, who do not read many books, do not realize one word can mean many things. Here we're talking about speaking. Ejaculation as an utterance, not ejaculation as in sexual. No, not at all. A sudden, sharp utterance. We're not talking about what happens when a man and a woman get together and they have some fun in the bed. No, not that. Obviously, we're not talking about that. Anyhow, now that we have gotten done with that whole awkward experience, let us continue. How much confusion and what perplexities will that want of enlarging thyself in mental discourse raise in thee? As we see, we have that combination of words, mental discourse. This is saying, in other words, the discourse is mental. The spoken exchange is mental. You are speaking in your mind. But at times, peradventure, you should be in silence. Peradventure, you should ask this question. Peradventure simply means perhaps or maybe. Anyhow, I like to say that for some reason. Oh, as you can hear, my throat is getting hoarse. I can talk somewhat like a machine gun, but without water. I will drink some. Good Lord. All right. Maybe a little more. I may have to get some more of that jar beside me. I have to get up and do it later, because I've drunk what is in this glass, and if I need more, I have to get up and do it. I suppose I will have to expend a bit more effort in this video, and if I'm going to be talking a great deal, I really need to drink water. It is a little cool, so that will cool my vocal cords, and peradventure they are getting a little too hot. How much confusion and what perplexities that want of enlarging thyself in mental discourse raise in thee. And if in such a juncture thou hast not a ghostly father, expert in the mystical way, thou wilt certainly, now some of you are saying, oh, ghostly? Is it ghosts? Ghostly can mean the same thing as spiritual. Alright, ghostly can mean the same thing as spiritual father, but in the Catholic tradition they had people, essentially this was a teacher. Essentially a teacher. Now, many of us who are very purist about things, we do not consider any man father, and we do not call men father, but in that Catholic tradition, as well as amongst many other people, they use the term as a father as a mentor or spiritual guide or teacher or what have they. As myself, I do not use this term. Jesus said, call no man father, so I really adhere to that. Other people, they don't, but that's all right. We read and we learn and we try to understand. All right. Anyhow, thou wilt certainly conclude that thy soul is out of order, and that for the security of thy conscience thou standest in need of a general confession. And all that will be got by that care will be the shame and confusion of both. Oh, how many souls are called to the inward way! and the spiritual fathers for want of understanding their case. Instead of guiding and helping them forwards, stop them in their course, and ruin them. Thou oughtest then to be persuaded that thou mayest not draw back when thou wantest expansion in discourse in prayer. That is thy greatest happiness, because it is a clear sign that the Lord will have thee walk by faith and silence in his divine presence, which is the most profitable and easiest path, in respect that with a simple view or amorous attention to God, the soul appears like a humble supplicant before its Lord, or as an innocent child that casts itself. And I remember I came unto the word juncture, and I just want to review that for a little while. Sometimes I even have to review words for my own benefit. I keep opening and closing this dictionary program. Peradventure, I should just keep it open so I do not have to open it over and over again. But anyhow, juncture, which dictionary, Moby Thesaurus. I'm not looking for, no. Where two things are joined, point in time, or a point in time is what I am essentially talking about. Okay, we were here at the bottom. Into the sweet and safe bosom of its dear mother. Thus did Gerson express it. Yes, I should zoom this. You can see it better. Thus did Gerson express it. Though I have spent 40 years in reading and prayer, yet I could never find anything more efficacious. Efficacious means effective. It means it works. It works. Nor compendious. Compendious essentially means very compendious. Some people may not know what compendious means. I take a great effort to essentially search up words and say what they mean so that you can understand exactly what is being said. I know some people do not do that, but I do. So, as for myself, I'm not such an intelligent individual in terms of just remembering things, so I do this for my own benefit too. Compendious, marked by or consisting of few words that are carefully chosen. In other words, you need very few words to say something very substantial. It would seem. Anyhow, okay. For attaining to mystical theology, then that our spirit should become like a young child and beggar in the presence of God. Now they say mystical means mystery. Mystical can mean mysterious. Essentially having to do with experience. Anything that has to do with experience, especially experiences that are mysterious, having to do with a spiritual nature, are often considered to be mystical. That is why you'll see that word many times. Okay, theosophy, theology, philosophical treatment of Christian doctrine. I think most of us know what essentially theology is, the science of religion, so to speak. A very common word, but it will, sometimes we encounter that. Then that our spirit should become like a young child and beggar in the presence of God. That kind of prayer is not only the easiest, but the most secure, because it is abstracted. Abstracted means separated from the operations of the imagination. That is always exposed to the tricks of the devil and the extravagances of melancholy and ratiocination, wherein the soul is easily distracted, and being wrapped up in speculation, reflects upon itself. When God had a mind to instruct his own captain Moses, and give him the 2 tables of the law, written in stone, he caught him up to the mountain, at what time God being there with him, the mount was darkened and environed with thick clouds. Moses standing idle, not knowing what to think or say, 7 days after, God commanded Moses to come up to the top of the mountain, wherein he showed him his glory, and filled him with great consolation. So in the beginning, when God intends, after an extraordinary manner, to guide the soul into the school of the divine and loving notices of the eternal law, he makes it go with darkness and dryness, that he may bring it near to himself, because the divine majesty knows very well that it is not by the means of one's own ratiocination or industry, ratiocination as to mean thinking, that a soul draws near to him and understands the divine documents, but rather by silent and humble resignation. The patriarch Noah gave a great instance of this, who after he had been by all men, reckoned a fool, floating in the middle of a raging sea, wherewith the whole world was overflowed, without sails and oars, and environed with wild beasts, that were shut up in the ark, walked by faith alone, not knowing nor understanding what God had a mind to do with him. What most concerns thee, O redeemed soul, is patience, not to desist from the prayer that thou art about, that is to say, interrupt it, stop it, deter it, delay it, so to speak. Though thou canst not enlarge in discourse, that is to say, that mental discourse, that mental spoken exchange, that mental speaking that you do in prayer, walk with firm faith and a holy silence, dying in thyself with all thy natural industry, trusting that God, who is the same and changes not, neither can err, that is to say, make errors, intends nothing but thy good. This is to say, in prayer, let us say you run out of words to say. But instead of stopping your prayer simply because you have no more words, you decide, I will continue to pray, even if it is in silence and there is no discourse. There is something valuable about that silence, is what this book is saying. Many Christians should pay attention to the words of Miguel de Molinos. They were so powerful that the Catholic Church saw them as a threat. And if they saw him as a threat, well, I suppose you may know that he was doing something quite right, in my opinion. Now let me continue. It is clear that he who is dying must needs feel it, but how well is time employed when the soul is dead, dumb, and resigned in the presence of God, there without any clutter or distraction, to receive the divine influences. In other words, being silent before God in silent prayer, not speaking outward with your mouth. Now your mental speaking has been done because you have nothing more to say, and you are just sitting there with God. God is with you, God is in you, and you are just there before the Lord. And all of his influences are right there with you. It's coming upon you. And you are humble before God. The senses are not capable of divine blessings. This is to say the body, but the mind is. There's nothing you can perceive with flesh, with feel, touch, hearing. This is something completely spiritual. Hence, if thou wouldest be happy and wise, be silent and believe, suffer and have patience, be confident and walk on. It concerns thee far more to hold thy peace and to let thyself be guided by the hand of God than to enjoy all the goods of this world. And though it seem to thee that thou dost nothing at all, and art idle, being so dumb and resigned, yet it is of infinite fruit. Consider the blinded beast that turns the wheel of the mill, which though it see not, neither know what it does, yet does a great work in grinding the corn, and although it tastes not of it, yet its master receives the fruit, and tastes of the same. Who would not think during so long a time that the seed lies in the earth, but that it were lost? Yet afterwards it is seen to spring up, grow, and multiply. God does the same with the soul. When he deprives it of consideration and ratiocination, that is to say thinking, whilst it does nothing, and is in a manner undone, in time it comes to itself. Again, improved, disengaged, and perfect, having never hoped for so much favor. Take care then that thou afflict not thyself, nor draw back, though thou canst not enlarge thyself in discourse and prayer. Suffer, hold thy peace, and appear in the presence of God. Persevere constantly, and trust to his infinite bounty, who can give unto thee constant faith, true light, and divine grace. Walk as if thou wert blindfolded, without thinking or reasoning. Put thyself into his kind and paternal means fatherly, hands, resolving to do nothing but what his divine will and pleasure is. All right, I could continue to chapter 3, but I think I will end it here at chapter 2. Viewers, I think I've read a good deal here, enough for you to sort of get the point. This is going to be the type of series on my channel where I read straight through. This book is extremely important to me. I do consider myself to be a Christian who is a quietist. In other words, I consider quiet prayer to be the most effective type of prayer. It is very simple. What we call quiet prayer, that is all Quietism has to do with. Quietism is a classification that was forged as an insult. Just like the Romans belittled the Christians by calling them Christians, so too were, people, if you were called a quietist, it's because the Catholic Church had come up with that term to insult them. The idea, the saying was at the time, well, the Catholic Church will not even allow you to be quiet. They have banned quiet prayer. If you do not adhere to, the ceremonies, because there were a lot of people, they were doing things like they were not taking these ceremonies like Mass as seriously. They were not taking the idols and portraits of Christ as seriously. They did not care about the physical things. They wanted the spiritual. This was very dangerous to the Catholic Church, in which routines, images, and orthodoxy is very important in that church, as well as the Eastern Orthodox Church. If they have any type of mysterious understandings or ideologies or philosophies, so to speak, in the religion, they have to have them be approved by their people who are in their hierarchy. The same is true with many Protestant groups, I would say. Quietism was considered to be a heresy, but you are going to have to judge for yourself. The base of it really is quiet prayer, and so it was a pleasure to share that with you, to give you some understandings about it. I suppose maybe this waterfall would make a good thumbnail for this video. Anyhow, viewers, I do hope you enjoyed this. There were some people who were interested in this book and were interested in some more of my religious videos, and some people have subscribed to this channel for that reason, and it would be very very unwholesome of me if I did not give them what they came here for. I know I have many videos that have to do with Video games like Final Fantasy VIII, they have to do with symbolism, they have to do with particular things that may raise some people's eyebrows, but I originally started this channel, you know, to have something to do with religion. So my videos having to do with religion are somewhat, they're essentially Christian videos, but they're somewhat spaced out. Most of them have to do with criticism of other people, reviews, and the like. But anyhow, viewers, I'm happy you were able to see this. I'm happy you were able to hear this. I will have a link to the book, as I've said. I would like to say, may you be blessed, and farewell. Okay.